Good morning and happy Mother's Day. If I've not had the privilege of meeting you, my name is Sheila and I am married to Jeremy. And it was funny, first service, when he preaches, he's always told me, you're not allowed to sit in the front because I can't make eye contact. I think really what it is he knows I might be like, don't say that. So really quick before I came on stage, he's like, where do you want me to sit? I'm like, you're fine as long as you're like not right in front of me. So I am so glad that you are here today. This is a good day to be here. We are starting a new series, and it's called Silent but Deadly. And I can remember several months back, Jeremy and Bryce and Chuck had gotten together to kind of plan out several of the sermon series. And he was so excited to tell me that we were starting Silent but Deadly on Mother's Day. And wasn't that just so funny? And the funny thing, I didn't know at the time I was going to be the one up here. But I will say this. So the only silent but deadly that happens in my house is from this adorable, cute, little, fluffy 5-pound dog that we have. I don't know if any of you have dogs and you can relate to that story, but she'll be sleeping on my lap, and all of a sudden, you just smell something, and everybody in the room is like, oh, it's Molly again. But what I have come to realize as I'm working through this, this is actually a really appropriate title for this series, because each week we're going to be examining different silent killers that are lurking just below the surface of our lives. And if we don't get a handle on them, if we don't recognize where they actually come from, they are deadly. There are consequences, and it doesn't just affect us, it affects others. So this first silent killer that we're going to talk about is one that I can guarantee we've all dealt with. It doesn't matter if you're young or old or male or female, but we have all dealt with it, and that is comparison. Even now, as I'm standing here right now, I am fighting my own battle of comparison because I never went to Bible college, and I didn't even have to take a public speaking class in college. So this is going to be fun. Just bear with me. People make comparisons for all different kinds of reasons. Some people like to point out flaws in other people to make them look good. Sometimes people just want the reassurance of what they're doing is okay, so they make a comparison against someone else. As I was getting ready for this talk, I was trying to remember when was it the first time that I can really remember struggling with comparison. And I really truly think that the Lord just brought to mind 4th grade. So I'm sure that I dealt with comparison before 4th grade, but in 4th grade, my family moved from Illinois to Indiana. And it wasn't a very big move, but it did require that my sister and I would switch schools. So I was already pretty nervous about being that new kid in school, and it was the middle of the school year, and so it wasn't like it was the beginning where everybody is sort of figuring things out. They've already got their rhythm. And I just remember that year noticing the things that the other kids had that maybe I didn't have, just their shoes or their clothes or even their hairstyles. And I can remember even into middle school, and I don't know why this has stuck with me for so long, but I really wanted a pair of Guess jeans. It seemed like all of my friends had Guess jeans, and so I wanted a pair of Guess jeans. And I didn't get those, and that's okay. And even looking back today at those comparisons, they seem so small and insignificant. But what I've come to realize is that those comparisons led to some pretty big insecurities in my life. And you see, that's how the enemy works. He whispers those little lies to us, and we begin to believe them as truth. And before we even know it, we're starting to see our own life through the lens of those lies. I felt like I was less than because I didn't have what everybody else had. Nobody even had to tell me that. That's just how I felt. And as we're going to see, comparison is not something that is new. We're going to read a story about Leah and Rachel, 2 sisters who are married to the same guy. So can you imagine some comparison happening there? But we're going to learn a few things about what comparison does from their story, and then we're going to figure out a few ways of how we can battle comparison. So we're going to begin in Genesis chapter 29, verse 16. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah, and the younger one was Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife. So just a little side note, it was custom of their day for the man to give a pretty substantial gift to the family of his future wife. And Jacob had just traveled there and he had nothing with him. So that is why he offered to work 7 years. And honestly, as I was starting to work through this, I said to Jeremy, we have 3 teenage daughters. We might need to kind of consider something like this. So in verse 21, it says, "Finally the time came for him to marry her. I have fulfilled my agreement," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her." So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood and prepared a wedding feast. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. Comparison comes from wounding. We all have a place in our lives that we frequently see ourselves as less than compared to someone else. And majority of the time, that comparison comes from a place of wounding. Whether it was words that were spoken to you, or you didn't get picked for the team, or you didn't get the job that you had hoped you had, or you were part of a broken relationship, wounding comes from all of those places. Leah knew from day one that she was not the one Jacob loved, and that caused her to feel very rejected and abandoned. Now, it goes later on in the passage that Jacob does eventually get to marry Rachel, but he's got to work another 7 years for Rachel. And he gets to marry her before the 7 years, so so at least that helps. But when Rachel found out that her husband that she had waited for 7 years had been with her sister, there was a lot of wounds that happened from that. It left her feeling very alone and abandoned. Continuing on in verse 31, it says, "When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children. But Rachel could not conceive. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, 'The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me.' She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, for she said, 'The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son.' Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, 'Surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons.' Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, 'Now I will praise the Lord.' And she stopped having children." Comparison often steals our joy. Leah was here, and God was choosing to bless her each time that she got pregnant. And each time that she got pregnant, she just thought, this is the time that my husband will love me. This time he will show affection for me. She even says in there that she was in misery, and the Lord saw that and blessed and gave her a child. Misery is a pretty intense word to use. And the interesting thing, I think, is that's 4 verses. We read it very quickly in 4 short verses. But for Leah, that was 9 months of being pregnant each time. And it doesn't give the timeline, so it doesn't say, if she spaced her kids out every 2 years or how that really worked. So for her to live this life of misery for that long. But I wonder how many times we do that. How many times do we miss what God is choosing to do in our life because we're looking for the next best thing? I have a love-hate relationship with reading. I love to learn, but it takes me forever to get through a book. And often the time is because I will be reading a book, and the majority of the books I read are topical, discipleship or marriage or parenting kind of books. And I'll talk to a friend, and she'll tell me about a book she just finished and how good it was. And so I'll get that book, and I'll start reading that book. And then next thing I know, on down the line, I'll run into another friend, and she'll tell me about a book she just read and how amazing this book was, and just had such great insight, and I got to get it. So, and it's free on Amazon right now if you download it. So I go and get that book, and I start that book. But the problem is that I never finished book 1, and I've never finished book 2. And God could have been using book 1 and book 2 to be telling me something in my life, but I did not allow that. I didn't finish it. I was on to the next best thing. And oftentimes, I think that's what happens with us. Whether it's the next best thing in a relationship, a bigger house, a better vacation, there is always something that we are longing for, looking for. And when we do that, we miss out on what God is doing right then and there in our life. We probably all know someone who, or even us, has said, if only I get this job, life will be so much better. If only I get that house, it will make life easier. If only I made so much money, life will be so much easier. The problem with that is there will always be another if only. We will constantly be looking for the if only. We never get satisfied with where we think we're going to be. There's always more. And then when we do that, it steals our joy. Continuing on in chapter 30, verse 1, it says, "When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, 'Give me children or I'll die.' Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. 'Am I God?' he asked. 'He's the only one who has kept you from having children.' Then Rachel said, 'Take my maid Bilhah,' I think is how you say that, 'and sleep with her. She will bear children for me, and through her I will have a family too.'" Comparison often leads to jealousy. And as we can see in Rachel's example, jealousy leads us to making some pretty irrational choices. I mean, one minute Rachel's like, "Give me kids or I'm going to die." And then once she figures out that's not going to work, she says, "All right, why don't you go sleep with my maid and I'll have children through her." I think we can all agree that's not going to lead to a good place further on down the road. That's going to lead to more comparison and more feeling empty. So Jeremy and I have been married next month, actually, 22 years. And our whole married life, we've been in ministry. And the first 6 years of ministry, we lived by our families, and it was great. And ever since then, the last 16 years, we've been away from family, and that's been okay. But there are times when I struggle with that, times when it's really hard for me, and probably more so for me than it is for Jeremy. But some of that is because I feel like my kids are missing out on that time with just that special time with their grandparents and their cousins, and for family to be there for birthdays and sporting events and awards ceremonies. They miss that. And so honestly, there are times when I can become pretty jealous and envious of people who have their family nearby. Now, I have to recognize that it does me no good to stay there. I mean, staying there does not bring our families to us, does not take us to our families. It honestly leads to bitterness. And so I have to recognize that I can't stay there. And so what I will try to do is to pray. I mean, not pray for me that my situation changes, but pray for that person that I'm jealous of or that situation that I'm jealous of. If you've never tried that, you need to try it. It changes your perspective. And honestly, when I can step back, I can see how God has always provided people in our life that have become like family to us. Many of you in this room, people that we can do holidays with and celebrate birthdays with and share those special moments with our kids with. I'm so thankful for that. And so when I can step back from that, I can actually see how God is working. So I want to talk about a few ways that I think we can do to fight comparison. I think the first thing is we have to be honest. We have to recognize when we're comparing. God made only one of you, so be yourself. I will often tell my girls when they say, "I wish I had longer eyelashes or blue eyes, or I just really understood math better," that God doesn't mess up. This is who he made you to be, and it's okay. Just be yourself. We are not all gifted to do everything. God has uniquely gifted each of us to do something, to play our part. And a lot of times it's what you're passionate about. It's what you are excited, and that's part of your gifting. I think of it this way. If we were to go to a friend's house for dinner, and they said, "Okay, everybody bring a dish to share," and we show up, and we all have the same exact dish, green bean casserole. Now, I like green bean casserole, but I kind of like it as a side dish, not the main dish. I mean, I want bread and potatoes and meat to go along with that. So I think that is the same as our lives. It would be boring if we were all gifted and wired the same exact way. That is part of what makes us unique, that we all have our own gifting and calling. I think the second thing is we have to choose to be thankful. Thanksgiving is probably my favorite holiday and has been for a long time. And I think it's because it's not about gifts and it's not about traditions, although we probably have a few traditions we do. But it is truly about sharing a meal with friends and family and being thankful for all that God's done. And a lot of times you'll see in the month of November, people will post something on social media that they're thankful for each day, and I think that's a great thing. But let's not wait until November to be thankful. Let's start today. Maybe if for you, you get a journal or a notebook and you just start writing down something every day that you're thankful for. I mean, there may be days that you've had a really long, hard day and you get into bed and you are like, I'm just thankful for my bed. I'm thankful for the end of the day, and that's okay. In fact, as I was working through this, I had thought that I want to start a gratitude journal, like a family gratitude journal, because I want that to be something that my girls recognize too in their lives. And so I'm going to get a notebook and I'm just going to leave it out in the living room and I'm going to write the date on it and write things that I'm thankful for, and they can write things that they're thankful for, and Jeremy can write in it. And then it'll help us put our focus back on God and what He's doing in our lives. And it takes the focus off of us. The third thing is, I think we have to be mindful. We have to recognize that there is an enemy, and he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to steal our joy. He wants to kill our confidence, and he wants to he just wants to have us feel defeated and devalued. And one of the ways he does that is through comparison, telling us what she has is better and what they're doing is greater than what I can do. We have to recognize when we do that, make that comparison, and we also have to recognize what triggers that for us. Maybe for you, it's social media. I mean, Jeremy will say this often, but as we're scrolling through social media, we're comparing our reality to someone else's highlight reel. There's not very many times that people post their horrible, no good, very bad day kind of post. It's always like, oh, they were on this amazing vacation and their children just got all of these great awards at school, and wow, their house is amazing. Or maybe it's their family is appreciating them more than my family is appreciating me. So whatever that is, if that's for you, then take a break from social media. It's okay. Either take a break, or maybe you even just say, I'm going to get on social media for 10 minutes a day and set a timer. When it's done, be done. I grew up in a house where my dad is a carpenter, and so he built homes, and we would go see when he was building a house a lot of times. And I don't know if that's where my love came from for houses, but even as a teenager, I can remember going to Parade of Homes with my mom. And Parade of Homes is something where different builders build a model home, and usually it's got all the upgrades. And I can just remember, even as a teenager, like walking through the house and thinking, oh, if this was my house, this would be so awesome. And even today, I will sit and scroll through the realtor websites. It's kind of like a brainless activity. If we're sitting watching TV, I'll just be scrolling through. And a lot of the times, I like to look at the houses that are like way out of our price range, because I just want to see like how many bedrooms do they have and bathrooms, and let me check out their kitchen. But I noticed a few years ago, I had said to Jeremy, I was starting to become pretty discontent with our home that God had given us. Now, I'm sure watching Fixer Upper did not help that. Because I was thinking maybe we should knock out this wall, and maybe we need to make this room a media room. And so I had to take a break from getting on that website and watching HGTV. I mean, I had to stop because it was making me feel like what I had was not good enough. So whatever it is that causes you to have that comparison, then figure that out and just make a plan to stop it, to change it. Take a break. Maybe it's just you need to take a break. I think the other thing is prayer is essential. When you notice that comparison is starting to creep in, you need to take that very thought captive and you tell the devil, no, not today. I mean, all you have to do is speak Jesus' name. There is power in that. And it is amazing when we can recognize where those negative voices are coming from. I think, would I say the things that I hear the enemy say to me, to my children or my husband, I hear things like, you're not worthy, you're insignificant, you're not creative. I would never speak those things to my kids or my husband. So why would I waste time dwelling on those things and assuming that they're from a loving Heavenly Father? I would never do that. I think that I know today is a big day for so many ladies, especially, where comparison can creep in. Maybe for you, you are single and you have longed to be married. Maybe you have dealt with infertility and loss, and that's been a real struggle. Maybe for you, right now, you are in the trenches of parenting, and it is a tough season, and you just don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel right now. Or maybe you think you'll never be that type of mom, or that you don't have a good relationship with your mom that you had hoped you would have. Maybe for you, right now, life is not at all how you envisioned it would be. Wherever you are today, let me just remind you that comparison is a killer. Even as we conquer comparison, it's going to look different than the person sitting next to you. If you are hearing things like you are not good enough or you will never measure up, you need to know those are straight from the enemy. Moms, I want to speak specifically to you. When we compare ourselves to the other women around us, it leaves us feeling like we do not measure up, and it steals our joy. The truth is, God did not call any of those other women to be the mother of your kids. He chose and equipped you for that very specific task of raising the kids that he has blessed you with. And man, once we can recognize that, there is such freedom in that. There is so much joy because we are not wasting our time on comparing. And we can just enjoy knowing that we get to be the one that he chose to care for our kids. So let me close this in prayer. Father, I just thank you for your word. I thank you for the power of your word. And Lord, I thank you that you are with us in the hard and difficult places. And we know, Lord, that you are able to do amazing things there. Father, I just ask that you would help us to be aware of when the voices that we're hearing, recognize where they're coming from, Lord. I pray that you just bind the enemy from trying to enter our minds, trying to make us compare ourselves to someone else. We are uniquely created by you, and you are perfect, and you don't make mistakes, Lord. So help us to put our focus on you and to trust you, Lord. And I pray that in your most precious and holy name, Jesus. Amen.